Warning: the following video have flashy images, so be aware of any seizures. Make sure to hit the subscribe button and leave your opinion on the following stories. Thank you, and I hope you enjoy. I found a dark web forum where users shared disturbing audio recordings of their own nightmares. Alright, buckle up folks. This is a tale straight out of the twisted corners of the internet. So there I was, like any other night, scrolling through the depths of the web, diving deeper and deeper until I stumbled upon something that sent chills down my spine. It all started innocently enough. I was bored, looking for something to kill time. And that's when I stumbled upon a thread on some obscure forum. The title? I found a dark web forum where users shared disturbing audio recordings of their own nightmares. Yeah, you read that right. Nightmares. Curiosity piqued. I clicked on it, not really knowing what to expect. The thread was full of stories from people who claimed they'd stumbled upon this eerie corner of the internet. Some said it was just a hoax. Others swore it was real. Me? I had to find out for myself. So, armed with a hefty dose of skepticism and a healthy dose of morbid curiosity, I set out to find this elusive dark web forum. It wasn't easy, let me tell you. The dark web is like navigating a maze blindfolded. But after what felt like hours of searching, I finally stumbled upon it. The forum was something else. It was like stepping into a nightmare itself. The layout was crude, the colors were all wrong, and the posts were filled with cryptic messages and disturbing images. But the real kicker? The audio recordings. Users were sharing recordings of their own nightmares. I'm talking about the kind of nightmares that make your skin crawl and your blood run cold. And let me tell you, listening to them was like staring into the abyss. There were screams, whispers, strange noises that defied explanation. It was like being transported into a realm of pure terror. But here's the thing that really got under my skin. Some of those recordings, they sounded familiar, like really familiar. It was as if they were plucked straight from the darkest recesses of my own mind. And that's when I knew I had to dig deeper. I had to find out who was behind this and what their endgame was. But little did I know, I was about to uncover something far more sinister than I ever could have imagined. I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to this dark web forum than meets the eye. So, armed with nothing but my laptop and a healthy dose of paranoia, I delved deeper into the rabbit hole. The forum was like a labyrinth of nightmares, each post leading me further and further into the darkness. People were sharing their most twisted, horrifying experiences, and I couldn't tear myself away. It was like watching a car crash in slow motion, horrifying, yet strangely compelling. But here's the thing that really got to me. Some of the recordings, they weren't just random noises. They were messages that seemed to be directed at me. At least, that's what it felt like. I know it sounds crazy, but I could swear I heard my own name whispered in the darkness, accompanied by chilling laughter. I tried to brush it off, as my imagination running wild, but deep down, I knew there was something more going on here. Something sinister lurking in the shadows, just out of reach, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. But still, I couldn't bring myself to leave. Call it morbid curiosity or just plain stupidity, but I had to know what was behind all of this. So I kept digging, trawling through post after post, hoping to uncover some clue as to who was behind this twisted game. And that's when I stumbled upon something that made my blood run cold. It was a recording, but this time, it wasn't just random noise. It was a voice that I recognized all too well. It was mine, and it was saying things that I had never said, things that I had never even thought of. It was like listening to a version of myself that I didn't even know existed. I felt a chill run down my spine as I listened, my heart pounding in my chest. Who was behind this? How were they able to manipulate my voice like that? And most importantly, what did they want from me? I knew I had to find out, no matter the cost. So, with a shaky hand and a racing heart, I clicked on the next post, steeling myself for whatever horrors lay ahead. Alright, so picture this. I'm sitting there, staring at my screen, trying to wrap my head around what I just heard. My own voice, saying things that I know for a fact I never said. It was like something out of a nightmare. But despite the creeping sense of dread gnawing at my insides, I couldn't tear myself away from the forum. I had to know more. I had to find out who was behind all of this and why they were targeting me. So, with a newfound sense of determination, I set out to unravel the mystery. I combed through every post, every comment, every recording, looking for some clue, some hint as to who the mastermind behind this twisted game was. And slowly but surely, I started to piece together the puzzle. There were patterns, subtle clues hidden in plain sight, cryptic messages, mysterious symbols, hints of a larger conspiracy lurking just beneath the surface. But the more I uncovered, the more questions I had. Who were these people sharing their nightmares? Were they victims or willing participants? And what did any of this have to do with me? I felt like I was losing my mind, like I was caught in some twisted web of deceit and manipulation. But still, I couldn't stop. I had to know the truth, no matter how horrifying it might be. And then, just when I thought I couldn't take it anymore, I stumbled upon something that made my blood run cold. It was a recording, but this time, it wasn't just my voice. It was someone else's voice. Someone I knew. Someone who shouldn't have been there. I listened in horror as the voice whispered my name, accompanied by a string of chilling threats and promises of unspeakable horrors. It was like a punch to the gut, knocking the wind out of me and leaving me gasping for air. Who was behind this? How did they know me? And most importantly, what did they want from me? The questions swirled around in my mind, taunting me with their elusive answers. But one thing was for sure. I wasn't going to stop until I found out, no matter what it took. Alright, so here's where things start to get really intense. I was knee-deep in this twisted nightmare, and there was no turning back now. Every part of me screamed to run, to get as far away from that forum as possible. But I couldn't. Call it stubbornness or sheer stupidity, but I had to see this through to the end. I spent hours, days even, scouring the forum for any shred of information that could lead me to the truth. I barely slept, barely ate, consumed by the need to uncover the identity of the person behind all of this madness. But the deeper I delved, the more the lines between reality and nightmare blurred. I started seeing things, shadows lurking in the corners of my vision, whispers echoing in the darkness. It was like the forum was seeping into my very soul, infecting me with its twisted influence. And then, just when I thought things couldn't get any worse, they did. I received a message. It was short, just a few cryptic words, but it sent shivers down my spine. We know who you are. We're watching you. I felt like I was being hunted, like there was nowhere I could hide from the unseen forces that lurked in the shadows. Every sound, every shadow sent me spiraling deeper into paranoia and fear. But still, I couldn't stop. I was determined to uncover the truth, no matter the cost. So, with shaking hands and a pounding heart, I continued my investigation, clinging to the hope that I would find some answers before it was too late. But as the days turned into weeks, and the weeks turned into months, it became increasingly clear that I was in over my head. The forum had consumed me, body and soul, and there was no escape. I was trapped in a nightmare of my own making, with no way out. And then, just when I thought I couldn't take it anymore, I stumbled upon the final piece of the puzzle. It was a recording, but this time, it was different. It was a confession, a chilling admission of guilt from the person behind it all. I listened in horror as they detailed their twisted motivations, their sickening delight in manipulating others for their own amusement. And then, just as suddenly as it had begun, it was over. The recording ended, leaving me alone in the darkness, with nothing but my thoughts and the knowledge that I had been played for a fool. I felt like I was teetering on the edge of sanity, like one wrong move would send me hurtling into the abyss. But still, I couldn't tear myself away. I had to know the truth, no matter how horrifying it might be. So, with a heavy heart and a weary soul, I clicked on the final post, bracing myself for whatever lay ahead. Okay, brace yourselves, because this is where it all comes crashing down. I was staring at my screen, my heart pounding in my chest, as I read the final post on the forum. It was like a punch to the gut, knocking the wind out of me and leaving me gasping for air. The post was from the person behind it all, the mastermind pulling the strings from the shadows. They reveled in their twisted game, taunting me with their sickening glee at my expense. It was like staring into the eyes of pure evil, and I couldn't tear myself away. But then, just when I thought things couldn't get any worse, they dropped the bombshell. They knew who I was. They knew everything about me, my fears, my secrets, my darkest desires, and they weren't afraid to use them against me. I felt like I was suffocating, like the walls were closing in around me, and there was no escape. Every fiber of my being screamed to run, to get as far away from that forum as possible. But I was frozen in place, paralyzed by fear and uncertainty. And then, just as suddenly as it had all begun, it was over. The forum disappeared, leaving behind nothing but a gaping void where it once stood. I was alone, adrift in a sea of darkness, with nothing but my thoughts and the knowledge that I had been played for a fool. But still, I couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't over, that somewhere out there, in the darkest corners of the internet, the person behind it all was still watching, still waiting, still plotting their next move. I felt like I was trapped in a nightmare, with no way out and no end in sight. But still, I couldn't bring myself to give up hope, because deep down, I knew that no matter how dark the night may seem, there's always a glimmer of light waiting to guide you home. And I was determined to find it, no matter what it took. I joined a dark web group claiming to offer guidance on performing rituals for power and wealth, but the price they demanded was more than I bargained for. It all started innocently enough, as these things often do. I was a curious soul, always drawn to the mysteries lurking beneath the surface of everyday life. So when I stumbled upon a forum thread discussing the existence of a dark web group purportedly offering guidance on performing rituals for power and wealth, my interest was immediately piqued. The thread was shrouded in secrecy, with users speaking in cryptic language and exchanging veiled references to their experiences within the group. They spoke of whispered promises of untold riches and forbidden knowledge, all attainable through the performance of rituals that bordered on the supernatural. Despite the warnings of the more cautious users, I found myself unable to resist the allure of the unknown. With trembling fingers, I navigated the labyrinthine depths of the dark web until I found the elusive group's website. It was a stark, minimalist page, devoid of any embellishments, save for a single pulsating symbol that seemed to beckon me closer. After what felt like an eternity of hesitation, I clicked the join button and thus began my descent into darkness. Almost immediately, I received a response, an email, short and to the point, containing nothing more than a set of instructions and a warning. Enter at your own risk. The instructions were simple yet chilling in their implications. I was to gather a series of seemingly innocuous items: a black candle, a silver dagger, a lock of my own hair, and perform a ritual at the stroke of midnight, under the light of the full moon. As I read through the instructions, a sense of foreboding settled over me like a suffocating shroud, but still, I couldn't bring myself to turn back. The promise of power and wealth had taken hold of me, driving out any semblance of reason or caution. That night, as the clock struck 12 and the moon hung heavy in the sky, I found myself standing alone in a deserted clearing, surrounded by the trappings of the ritual. The candle flickered ominously in the darkness, casting long shadows that seemed to dance and writhe of their own accord. With trembling hands, I began to recite the incantation, the words feeling foreign and unnatural on my tongue. As I spoke, a chill wind swept through the clearing, stirring the leaves and sending a shiver down my spine. And then, in an instant, it was over. The ritual complete, the air heavy with the weight of something unseen and unspeakable. I felt a surge of triumph mingled with fear, the thrill of having crossed a threshold from which there could be no return. But little did I know, this was only the beginning of my descent into madness. The darkness had claimed me, body and soul, and there was no escaping its grasp. In the days that followed the ritual, I found myself haunted by strange dreams and inexplicable occurrences. Shadows seemed to linger at the edges of my vision, and whispers echoed in the empty spaces of my mind. At first, I dismissed these phenomena as nothing more than the product of an overactive imagination. But as the days turned into weeks and the whispers grew louder, I began to suspect that something far more sinister was at play. It was during one of these sleepless nights that I received another email from the dark web group. The message was brief and cryptic, containing only a single word: congratulations. Confusion and apprehension warred within me as I read those ominous words. What had I accomplished, and at what cost? The answer came to me in a series of vivid nightmares, each more terrifying than the last. I found myself standing once again in the clearing, surrounded by shadows that twisted and writhed in the darkness. And there, in the center of it all, stood a figure cloaked in shadow, its eyes gleaming with malevolent intent. It spoke to me in a voice that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once, promising me power beyond imagining in exchange for a single, simple task, to do its bidding without question or hesitation. At first, I resisted, recoiling from the creature's offer with a mixture of fear and revulsion. But as the days passed and the whispers grew louder, I found myself inexorably drawn back to the darkness, unable to resist its seductive pull. And so, with a heavy heart and trembling hands, I made a pact with the shadowy figure, sealing my fate in blood and darkness. From that moment on, my life became a living nightmare. The whispers grew louder, the shadows darker, until I could no longer distinguish reality from illusion. Everywhere I turned, I saw signs of the darkness closing in around me, its tendrils reaching out to claim me as its own. But still, I clung to the hope that there was a way out, a path to redemption that would allow me to escape the darkness that had consumed me. Little did I know, the true horror had yet to reveal itself, lurking just beyond the edges of my sanity, waiting to drag me down into the depths of despair. As the days turned into weeks and the weeks into months, I found myself sinking deeper and deeper into the abyss of the dark web group's influence. Every moment of every day was consumed by the relentless whispers, driving me to the brink of madness with their ceaseless cacophony. But amidst the chaos, there came a glimmer of hope, a chance encounter with a fellow member of the group, a woman whose face was shrouded in shadow and whose voice dripped with honeyed promises of salvation. She spoke of a ritual, ancient and forbidden, that had the power to break the hold of the darkness and set me free once and for all. All I had to do was gather the necessary ingredients and perform the ritual under the cover of darkness. Hope blossomed within me like a fragile flower, fragile and fleeting, as I set out to gather the ingredients for the ritual. Each item was more difficult to obtain than the last, requiring me to delve deeper into the darkest corners of the web and barter with beings whose very existence defied comprehension. But still, I pressed on, driven by desperation born of sheer terror and a longing for freedom that burned like a beacon in the darkness. Finally, the night of the ritual arrived, and I found myself standing once again in the clearing, surrounded by the trappings of the ancient ceremony. The air was heavy with the scent of incense and blood, and the shadows seemed to dance with a malevolent energy all their own. With trembling hands, I began to recite the incantation, the words flowing from my lips like a prayer whispered into the void. As I spoke, I felt a surge of power coursing through me, filling me with a sense of euphoria that bordered on ecstasy. But just as I thought myself victorious, the shadows began to close in around me, their tendrils reaching out to drag me back into the abyss from which I had sought to escape. In that moment, I realized the true cost of my folly. I had been a pawn in a game far larger and more insidious than I could have ever imagined, and now there was no escape from the darkness that had consumed me. With the failure of the ritual, I knew that all hope of escape had been extinguished. The darkness that had once seemed like a tantalizing promise of power and wealth now loomed over me like a suffocating shroud, its tendrils wrapping themselves around me in a vice-like grip. I was a prisoner in my own mind, tormented by visions of unspeakable horror and consumed by a despair so profound it threatened to swallow me whole. Everywhere I turned, I saw signs of the darkness closing in around me, its malevolent presence seeping into every facet of my existence like a poison spreading through my veins. And yet, amidst the chaos and despair, there came a glimmer of hope. a chance encounter with a fellow member of the group, a man whose face was shrouded in shadow and whose voice dripped with venomous promises of vengeance. He spoke of a way to break free from the darkness, a final desperate gamble that would either save me or condemn me to an eternity of torment. All I had to do was trust him, to follow his lead without question or hesitation. With nothing left to lose, I threw myself into his arms, clinging to the hope that he offered like a drowning man grasping for a lifeline in the midst of a raging storm. Together, we embarked on a journey into the heart of darkness itself, delving deeper and deeper into the twisted labyrinth of the dark web in search of a way to break the hold of the shadows that bound me. But with each step we took, the darkness seemed to grow stronger, its malevolent presence pressing down upon us like a weight too heavy to bear. And as we neared our destination, I felt a sense of dread creeping over me like a creeping fog, obscuring my vision and clouding my mind with visions of unspeakable horror. But still, I pressed on, driven by a desperation born of sheer terror and a longing for freedom that burned like a beacon in the darkness. And then, at last, we reached our destination, a forgotten corner of the dark web, where the shadows gathered like a gathering storm, and the air was thick with the stench of decay. With trembling hands, I performed the final ritual, calling upon powers beyond my comprehension in a desperate bid for salvation. And as I spoke the final words of the incantation, I felt a surge of power coursing through me, filling me with a sense of euphoria that bordered on madness. But even as I reveled in my newfound strength, I knew that the darkness would not be so easily defeated. For though I had escaped its clutches for now, I knew that it would always be waiting, lurking in the shadows, ready to drag me down into the depths of despair once more. In the aftermath of the ritual, a fragile peace settled over me like a shroud, a temporary respite from the relentless onslaught of the darkness that had consumed me. But even as I basked in the fleeting moments of tranquility, I knew that it would not last, for the shadows were gathering once more, their tendrils reaching out to drag me back into the abyss from which I had sought to escape. And as I stood on the precipice of oblivion, I knew that there was only one path left for me to take. With a heavy heart and trembling hands, I set out to confront the darkness that had plagued me for so long, to face my demons head on and emerge victorious, or be consumed by the abyss that awaited me. And so, armed with nothing but my own determination and a sense of purpose born of desperation, I embarked on a journey into the heart of darkness itself, prepared to do battle with the forces that sought to destroy me. The journey was long and arduous, filled with trials and tribulations that tested my resolve to its very limits. But with each step I took, I felt a sense of clarity descending upon me, a newfound sense of purpose that drove me ever onward towards my ultimate goal. And then, at last, I reached the heart of the darkness, a place where the shadows gathered like a gathering storm, and the air was thick with the stench of decay. With a final defiant cry, I confronted the darkness head-on, calling upon powers beyond my comprehension in a desperate bid for redemption. And as I faced my demons with courage and determination, I felt a sense of peace descending upon me, a quiet calm that whispered of victory in the face of overwhelming odds. For in that moment, I knew that I had triumphed over the darkness that had plagued me for so long, emerging from the crucible of despair stronger and more resilient than ever before. And though the shadows may still linger at the edges of my consciousness, I know that I will never again be consumed by the abyss that once threatened to engulf me. For I have faced my demons and emerged victorious, a testament to the power of the human spirit to overcome even the darkest of nights. I thought I was anonymous on the dark web until someone started sending me cryptic messages, revealing they knew everything about me. I never thought much about privacy online. I mean, who does, right? We all think we're safe behind our screens, hidden behind usernames and passwords. But I learned the hard way that anonymity is just an illusion, especially when you're dabbling in the dark corners of the internet. It all started innocently enough. Curiosity got the better of me, and I found myself exploring the depths of the dark web. You know, the shady side of the internet, where anything goes. I thought I was being smart, using VPNs and Tor browsers to cover my tracks. But turns out, I was just another naive fool thinking I could outsmart the system. One night, as I was scrolling through some forums, I stumbled upon a thread that caught my eye. It was titled something like "Secrets Revealed." Intrigued, I clicked on it, expecting to find some gossip or conspiracy theories. Instead, what I found chilled me to the bone. The post was a series of cryptic messages addressed directly to me. It started innocuously enough, with details about my online activity, the websites I visited, the forums I frequented, even my real name. But as I read on, the messages grew more sinister, delving into personal details that no stranger should know. I felt a cold sweat break out on my brow as I realized the gravity of the situation. Whoever was behind these messages had been watching me, studying me, perhaps even stalking me. Panic set in as I frantically tried to trace the source, but it was like chasing a ghost in the darkness. What terrified me the most was the tone of the messages, mocking, taunting, almost as if the sender was reveling in my fear. They knew my fears, my weaknesses, my darkest secrets. It was like they had peeled back the layers of my psyche, exposing me to the world in ways I couldn't comprehend. As I sat there in front of my screen, trembling with fear and paranoia, I knew one thing for certain. I was no longer anonymous, and whoever was behind those messages was playing a game, a twisted game with me as the unwilling pawn. But little did I know, the worst was yet to come. I couldn't shake off the feeling of being watched, even when I logged off and tried to go about my day. Every shadow seemed to conceal a lurking presence. Every whisper felt like a taunt from the anonymous sender. But despite my fear, I couldn't resist the urge to dig deeper. I combed through my digital footprint with a fine-tooth comb, searching for any clue that might lead me to the identity of my tormentor. But the more I searched, the more hopeless it seemed. It was like trying to find a needle in a haystack, except the needle was a malevolent force bent on my destruction. And then, just when I thought things couldn't get any worse, I received another message. This time, it wasn't on the dark web. It was in my inbox, in plain sight for anyone to see. It was a picture of me taken from outside my window. The sender knew where I lived. They knew my every move. My blood ran cold as I stared at the image, feeling exposed and vulnerable in ways I never thought possible. I thought about going to the police, but what could I tell them? That someone was tormenting me from the shadows, that I was being hunted like prey in a sick game of cat and mouse. No, I was on my own in this nightmare, with nowhere to turn and no one to trust. So I did the only thing I could think of. I doubled down on my efforts to uncover the truth, to unmask the faceless terror that haunted my every waking moment. But with each step I took down the rabbit hole, I felt myself slipping further into madness. The lines between reality and paranoia blurred, and I began to question everything and everyone around me. Who could I trust? Who was watching me? And most importantly, why me? As the days turned into weeks and the weeks turned into months, the messages kept coming, each one more disturbing than the last. But no matter how hard I tried to fight back, it seemed like the darkness was closing in, suffocating me in its grasp. I knew then that I was in too deep, that there was no escape from the nightmare I had unwittingly stumbled into. All I could do was brace myself for the inevitable confrontation, praying that I would emerge from the other side with my sanity intact. But deep down, I knew that some demons never let go, and mine was just getting started. As the days dragged on, I became consumed by paranoia. Every shadow, every creak of the floorboards sent shivers down my spine. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat, couldn't focus on anything but the looming threat that hung over me like a dark cloud. The messages kept coming, each one more ominous than the last. They knew everything about me, my fears, my secrets, my most intimate thoughts. It was like they were inside my head, whispering poison into my ear, driving me to the brink of madness. I tried to block them out, to ignore the constant barrage of taunts and threats, but it was like trying to stop a flood with a bucket, futile and exhausting. Everywhere I turned, I saw signs of their presence, reminders that I was never truly alone. I began to withdraw from the world, cutting ties with friends and family in a desperate attempt to protect them from the danger that stalked me. But no matter how hard I tried to isolate myself, the darkness always found a way in, creeping into every corner of my life like a virus. And then, just when I thought things couldn't get any worse, they did. I received a package in the mail, a small, innocuous-looking box with no return address. Inside was a USB drive containing files that sent a chill down my spine. They were videos of me, taken without my knowledge or consent. They showed me going about my daily life, unaware that I was being watched from the shadows. It was like I was watching a horror movie starring myself, and I couldn't look away no matter how much I wanted to. I knew then that I was trapped, ensnared in a web of darkness from which there was no escape. Whoever was behind this knew me better than I knew myself, and they were using that knowledge to tear me apart, piece by piece. I wanted to fight back, to reclaim control over my life. But deep down, I knew that the only way to end this nightmare was to confront the darkness head on, to stare into the abyss and pray that it didn't stare back. And so, with a heavy heart and trembling hands, I prepared myself for the final showdown, whatever form it may take. I couldn't take it anymore. The constant barrage of messages, the feeling of being watched every second of every day, it was driving me to the edge of insanity. I had to put an end to it, once and for all. Armed with nothing but my courage and a burning desire for answers, I set out to confront my tormentor. I didn't know what I would find, or if I would even make it out alive, but I had come too far to turn back now. I followed the breadcrumbs they had left for me, tracing their digital footprint back to its source. It was a labyrinth of deception and misdirection, designed to throw me off their scent. but I was determined to see this through to the end, no matter the cost. Finally, after what felt like an eternity of searching, I found myself face to face with the one behind the curtain. They were just like me, a faceless stranger hiding behind a screen, their true identity obscured by layers of anonymity. But as I looked into their eyes, cold, calculating, devoid of any shred of humanity, I knew that this was no ordinary internet troll. This was a monster, a predator lurking in the shadows, waiting to pounce on unsuspecting prey like me. I demanded answers, demanded to know why they had targeted me, what they hoped to gain from tormenting me. But all I got in return was a cruel laugh, echoing through the darkness like nails on a chalkboard. They reveled in my fear, fed off my desperation like a parasite draining its host. They had no remorse, no empathy, no humanity left within them. They were a creature of pure evil, a force of nature hell-bent on destruction. But even as they taunted me, I refused to back down. I stood my ground, refusing to let them break me like they had so many others before me. And as the final showdown unfolded, I realized that the power was in my hands all along, the power to choose my own fate, to write my own ending to this twist tale. With one final act of defiance, I severed the connection, cutting off their influence over me once and for all. And as I watched them fade into the darkness, a sense of peace washed over me like a cleansing tide. I was free, free from the chains that had bound me, free to live my life on my own terms. But deep down, I knew that the scars they had left behind would never fully heal. I would always carry the weight of their cruelty with me, a constant reminder of the darkness that lurks within us all. And as I walked away from the screen, leaving the nightmare behind me, I vowed to never forget the lessons I had learned the hard way. In the aftermath of my ordeal, I found myself grappling with a myriad of emotions: relief, fear, anger, and a lingering sense of unease. It was like emerging from a long and terrifying nightmare, only to find that the scars it left behind would never fully fade. I tried to go back to my old life, to pretend like nothing had happened, but the memories haunted me, lurking in the shadows of my mind, waiting to resurface at the slightest provocation. I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, of being hunted by unseen forces beyond my control. But with time, I began to find solace in the little things: the warmth of the sun on my face, the laughter of loved ones, the simple pleasures of everyday life. I refused to let the darkness consume me, to let it dictate the course of my future. And as I looked back on my journey, I realized that I had emerged from the fire stronger than before. I had faced my fears head on, stared into the abyss, and emerged unscathed. I had proven to myself that I was capable of overcoming even the darkest of trials, of finding light in the midst of despair. But I also knew that my story was far from over. The internet was a vast and unpredictable landscape, filled with dangers lurking around every corner. And while I couldn't predict what the future held in store, I was determined to face it with courage and resilience, knowing that no matter what challenges lay ahead, I would never face them alone.